Surrender that gigantic pie. To the fame, our rascally restaurant!
Pow. That's the sound of your memories hitting you right in the feels. If you grew up in the 1970s, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Our TV only had 3 channels, our phones were attached to walls, and our games didn't need charging. But man, did we have fun! Ready to zoom back to the grooviest decade ever? The 1970s, what a time to be alive. If you grew up back then, you got to experience life in a totally different way. We were lucky we got most of our craziness out of our system before the internet came along. There was no worrying about someone recording your antics and making you go viral.
Our high-tech stuff back then would make kids today roll their eyes.
Hey, hey, it's close and play. Close the lid. The music plays.
I can still hear the satisfying click of my close-and-play record player, dropping the needle on my favorite 45s. The static crackle before the music kicked in was like magic. And talk about instant gratification. Nothing beat watching a Polaroid photo slowly appear. Everyone huddled around, waiting to see if you got the shot or if someone blinked again. Some lucky kids even had those Panasonic wrist radios, trying to tune in the local station while pretending to be secret agents.
Forgotten about it, but we're I think that most of our troubles at this point.
If you wanted to chat with friends, you either walked to their house or braved the rotary phone, praying their big sister wouldn't answer. And pen pals? They were like prehistoric DM, each letter a tiny treasure that could take weeks to arrive. Nothing beats piling into Dad's massive Oldsmobile on those sticky summer evenings, the vinyl seats burning your legs as you fought for the window spot. I can still smell that mix of leather, Old Spice, and the promise of double-scoop ice cream cones. Dad would be fiddling with his prized 8-track player, trying to get Johnny Cash's voice to stop warbling, while Mom pretended not to notice we were all singing completely off-key. Sundays meant war with the station wagon. All of us armed with soapy sponges, attacking that chrome until it sparkled. Dad treated it like a military operation while we kids turned it into a water fight.
Scientifically developed, the incredible chromostone senses thermal changes deep within your body.
Remember those mood rings from the corner store? We'd press them against our skin, waiting for the colors to change like mini fortune tellers on our fingers. Black meant mysterious, blue was calm, and green. Well, nobody really knew what green meant, but we made up our own stories anyway.
Molds into silly animals and silly shapes.
Silly putty?
My favorite was Silly Putty, stretching headlines from the Sunday funnies until Dick Tracy's face looked like something from a funhouse mirror. The newsprint never quite came off your hands, but that was part of the charm. Breakfast was a sugar rush waiting to happen. I can still hear that distinct crunch of Cap'n Crunch and feel the way it scratched the roof of your mouth.
Listen, that's the sound of somebody eating my Cap'n Crunch.
The sweet smell of Pop-Tarts warming in the toaster. TV dinners were like winning the lottery. Those little aluminum trays with their perfectly separated compartments made every meal feel like an event. Salisbury steak night was the best, even if nobody really knew what Salisbury steak was. My dad's wardrobe was like a polyester rainbow exploded in his closet. His shirts with a collar so wide it could have taken flight. Half the buttons were always undone, showing off what he called his natural gold chain holder, that chest hair he was so proud of. Looking at old photos now makes me laugh, but man, he thought he was the epitome of cool, especially when he'd strut into the local disco in his white leisure suit. You haven't lived until you've felt the unique swish-swish of polyester pants on a hot summer day. Those suits were indestructible. You could spill anything on them, ball them up in a corner, and they'd bounce back looking perfect. Mom's wardrobe wasn't much better. Everything synthetic, everything bold. Those butterfly collars could double as wings if you caught a strong enough breeze. Every living room looked like a macrame jungle. I swear my aunt's house had more hanging plants than a greenhouse, all suspended in those intricately knotted holders she'd spend weeks making. That owl she crafted watched over us like some all-knowing rope guardian. The funny thing was, half those plants were plastic, but with all that macrame around them, nobody could tell the difference. Saturday nights meant clustering around the TV for SNL, shushing anyone who dared to speak during the sketches. We'd quote Belushi and Radner all week long, driving our teachers crazy with badly timed never-mind impressions. Missing an episode meant being completely lost in Monday's conversations. No YouTube replays to catch up on what you missed. Our kitchen was a time capsule of avocado green and harvest gold. That fridge hummed like a contented cat, its color matching the stove, the countertops, and even Mom's coffee percolator. She insisted it was sophisticated, but looking back, it was like cooking inside a giant green olive. Still, every appliance lasted forever. They built things differently back then. I remember saving my allowance for weeks to get that $6 million man figure.
Find him, Austin.
Stop him. Get the bomb.
That bionic eye was like having your spy gear. You'd lift his arm, hearing that perfect mechanical clicking sound, imagining you were Steve Austin himself. The rubber skin on his arms would roll up to reveal the bionics underneath. Pure magic to a kid's imagination. The library was this sacred space of wooden card catalogs and possibilities. That satisfying thunk of the drawer sliding out, the whisper of cards as you flipped through them, hunting treasure. The smell of old books and wood polish, the librarian's rubber stamp marking your due date. It was like a ritual. I can still feel the texture of those typed cards under my fingers. Movie day at school was like winning a mini lottery. The moment that film projector cart rolled in, the whole class would buzz with excitement. I can still hear that distinctive click-whir-click as the film threaded through, sometimes catching, making the picture jump and dance. Being chosen as a projector monitor was better than being a hall monitor or milk monitor combined. Our living room was a sea of golden brown shag carpet so deep you could lose your Hot Wheels in it. Mom had this special rake, like a tiny lawn tool, that we'd use to make perfect patterns after vacuuming. I spent hours creating mazes and roadways in that carpet until Mom would walk through and destroy my masterpiece. The vacuum cleaner would groan in protest, struggling through the thick forest of fibers. To this day, I swear there's a collection of my sister's baby teeth, several marbles, and Dad's missing cufflink buried somewhere in that carpet's depths. Nothing beat the smell of fresh ditto copies in the first period. Mrs. Harrison would pass them out still warm from the machine, and the whole class would do the ritual. Hold up the purple inked paper and take a deep sniff. That sweet, chemical perfume was better than any marker or glue we weren't supposed to smell. By the end of the day, our hands would be stained purple from the ink, like some secret club's badge of honor.
Lite-Brite, turn on the magic of colored.
My Lite-Brite was like having a personal constellation maker. I'd wait until dark, then plug it in, watching my pegboard masterpieces come to life with that magical glow. Created everything from rocket ships to flowers, each one looking like it was made of captured starlight. The real challenge was finding all those tiny pegs when they spilled. They'd scatter like colorful confetti, lying in wait for bare feet during midnight snack runs. Still worth every yelp of pain. The Starlight Drive-In was our Friday night paradise. Dad would back up our station wagon just right, flip down the tailgate, and we'd create a nest of blankets and pillows. That metal speaker hung on the window like a chatty robot, crackling out dialogue we'd have to fill in ourselves. The best part was the snack bar run between features, that brief adventure through the maze of cars, following the glow of the cartoon hot dog on the big screen. Sometimes I'd pretend to fall asleep during the second movie, just so Dad would carry me back to the car, even when I was probably too old for that. My lava lamp was like having a pet alien on my bedside table. It'd start as a giant blob at the bottom, then slowly stretch upward like some kind of space ballet. The whole room would smell slightly toasty from the bulb, mixing with the scent of my mom's potpourri. I'd spend hours watching those colorful blobs dance, making up stories about what they were trying to become. That soft, pulsing glow was better than any nightlight. It was like having a piece of tomorrow right there in my 70s bedroom. Then, Star Wars crashed into our world like a meteor. One minute we're playing with basic toys, the next we're all wielding wrapping paper tubes, making whoosh-whoosh lightsaber sounds, and arguing over who got to be Han Solo. That opening scene in the theater, you could hear jaws dropping across America as that Star Destroyer just kept coming and coming. For weeks afterward, we'd try using the Force to grab cookies from the kitchen or get our siblings in trouble. ABBA was like an earworm invasion nobody wanted to resist. Those songs would sneak into your head during math tests, make you dance in grocery store aisles, and turn every sleepover into an impromptu concert. There we'd be, using hairbrushes as microphones, belting out Dancing Queen like we were performing at Madison Square Garden. Even my dad would catch himself humming Waterloo while mowing the lawn.
Oh, sir, we'd like this Super Pong by Atari.
I'm sold out. That's a demonstrator, but I've got lots of these.
Well, we want Super Pong by Atari.
Yes, but
Pong might look primitive now, but back then it was like having a piece of the future in your living room.
See on your TV set, Telstar by Coleco.
That hypnotic boop, boop, boop as the dot bounced back and forth. We'd contort our bodies like that would somehow help control the paddle better, playing until Mom would yell about ruining our eyes or burning out the TV tube. Those marathon Pong sessions usually ended with everyone claiming they'd let the others win.
A left to the jaw, and...
Oh, my block is knocked off.
Rock'em Sock'em robots lived on our coffee table for an entire summer of '76. That sweet plastic smell when you first opened the box, the satisfying chunk of the controls, and that glorious crack when you landed the perfect uppercut. My brother Tommy and I had epic tournaments, complete with sportscaster commentary and victory dances. Mom eventually banished it to the basement after one too many championship matches ended in real-life wrestling. I was a master note folder in Mrs. Peterson's class, could turn a sheet of loose leaf into an origami football faster than anyone. We had this whole secret delivery system worked out. Pass it 2 rows over, 3 seats up, avoid Jenny. She was a notorious note interceptor. The real art was in the content. Those checkboxes drawn in different colored pens, hearts dotting every I, and the eternal question, do you like me? Every church basement potluck was a showcase of jiggly masterpieces. Aunt Betty's lime Jell-O, with shredded carrots suspended in it like orange confetti, was legendary. Not necessarily in a good way. But Mrs. Johnson across the street, she was the undisputed Jell-O queen. Her layered rainbow creation would arrive, wobbling majestically on her best serving plate, each layer perfectly distinct. Getting it out of the mold was like defusing a bomb. One wrong move and your masterpiece became fruit soup. Mrs. Anderson's cursive lessons were like boot camp for your fingers. Loop up, swing down, connect smoothly, she'd chant, while we practiced our capital Q's for the 100th time. Left-handed kids like Jimmy had it worst. By day's end, his hand would be covered in blue ink like he'd arm wrestled a squid. But that first time you could write your whole name in flowing script? Pure victory. The pencil sharpener was our classroom's time machine. Wind that cranks too long and you could waste half of math class. That hypnotic grinding sound, the smell of freshly sharpened wood, the satisfaction of pulling out a perfectly pointed pencil. Of course, there was also the heartbreak of over-sharpening your favorite pencil into a stub, or the embarrassment of breaking the point off immediately and having to do the walk of shame back to sharpen it again. Dad's waterbed was the coolest thing in our house, and the most dangerous. One birthday sleepover, my best friend Marcus bounced a little too hard and sent waves that knocked over Mom's favorite lamp. The gentle rocking usually meant instant sleep, but getting in without creating a tsunami was an art form. The worst was when our cat Mittens discovered her claws could make interesting things happen. That was one expensive repair bill. The Great Hair Revolution of '76. That's what I call my mom's dedication to the perfect feather. Our bathroom was like a hair salon every morning, steam fogging up the mirrors while she wielded that blow dryer like a weapon of mass destruction. The amount of Aquanet required to keep those feathers in place could have single-handedly destroyed the ozone layer. I'd watch her master the round brush technique, occasionally getting it so tangled we thought we'd have to cut it out. The whole house smelled like a beauty parlor until dinner time. When All in the Family came on, you could hear every TV on the block playing the same thing. We weren't supposed to watch, but we'd sneak peeks from the hallway, trying to understand why the grown-ups were laughing so hard. Archie Bunker's grumbling reminded me of Uncle Pete at Thanksgiving, and Edith's high-pitched Archie became our secret playground impression. We didn't get all the jokes, but we knew this was something different from the Brady Bunch. My big wheel was freedom on 3 plastic wheels, the Ferrari of the under 10 set. That satisfying scrunch as you pedaled down the sidewalk, the thrill of pulling the brake lever for a perfect spin-out that left black marks on the driveway. Poor Mrs. Johnson next door probably still twitches when she hears that sound. I was the undisputed king of our cul-de-sac, at least until Jimmy got a green machine for his birthday. The epic races we had. Pretty sure we took a few years off our parents' lives with some of those stunts. My Stretch Armstrong was probably the most abused superhero in history. Tommy and I would spend hours testing his limits, stretching him between our bedrooms through the hallway. That rubbery smell would fill the air as we'd try to make him touch both walls at once. The day he finally sprung a leak, that weird gel oozing out like alien blood, Mom found us performing emergency surgery with Band-Aids and Scotch tape. Never quite stretched the same after that. My prized Etch-a-Sketch was like a portable art studio. If your art only used straight lines and you had infinite patience. Spent one whole weekend trying to draw our house only to bump the corner and watch it vanish like magic erasing. The Rubik's Cube was even worse. I once got 5 whole squares of blue together. Felt like a genius until my brother pointed out I'd messed up all the other sides. That cube ended up mysteriously disappearing during spring cleaning. Then there were those clackers, probably the most dangerous toy ever invented. 2 solid acrylic balls on a string that you'd try to get clicking together. The faster they clacked, the cooler you were. Until one ball shattered and went flying across the playground. Bobby Jenkins still has a tiny scar above his eyebrow from the Great Clacker Incident of '76. And pet rocks? Mine was named Fred, had googly eyes and a tiny felt hat. Cost me $2 whole, which seemed completely reasonable for a rock I could have found in our driveway. Those little holes in old school desks, they weren't just random. They were actually for inkwells. My grandmother used to tell me stories about how she'd carefully dip her fountain pen in there during writing lessons. She'd always laugh about the time she accidentally knocked over the inkwell, and the dark blue ink went everywhere. All over her new white blouse. Can you imagine dealing with actual liquid ink at school? Kids these days would probably think we're making it up. The whole process was so delicate. You had to get just the right amount of ink on your pen, or you'd end up with either faded writing or big messy blobs on your paper. Book straps. Now that takes me back. Before everybody had those fancy backpacks with a million pockets, we'd just wrap our books up in these leather straps. The cool kids would sort of sling them over their shoulder, trying to look casual even though those books weighed a ton. I remember the satisfying sound of buckling up my strap at the end of the day, gathering all my textbooks and notebooks together. The not-so-fun part? When it rained, and you had to run home with your books getting all wet because there was no protection. And if your strap broke halfway home? That was a disaster waiting to happen. Hey, remember those massive pull-down maps in every classroom? There was something so magical about them, hanging there like mysterious scrolls waiting to be revealed. Our geography teacher, Mr. Thompson, would always make such a dramatic show of pulling them down. Sometimes they'd get stuck halfway, and he'd have to jump to reach the handle. Paper bag book covers. Now that was an art form all its own. Every September, we'd raid our parents' grocery bags to cover our textbooks. Remember that special technique? Folding the corners just right, making sure it was tight enough to stay on, but not so tight it would rip. Some kids would leave them plain brown, but most of us would turn them into our personal masterpieces. I used to cover mine with band logos and little doodles of whatever I was into that year. By the end of the semester, those covers would be filled with notes from friends, song lyrics, and random sketches from boring classes. It was like having a diary wrapped around your books. Those handwritten report cards. Man, they could make or break your weekend. I can still picture my teacher's red pen marks and those little comments they'd squeeze into the tiny spaces. Shows potential but talks too much in class. That was basically my life story. There was no hiding a bad grade either. You couldn't just delete it like you can with online grades now. You had to face the music and get that parent signature. But there was something kind of special about seeing your teacher's actual handwriting, knowing they took the time to write something personal about your progress. Sometimes you'd even get a little smiley face or a star if you did really well. The metal lunchboxes were like a status symbol in elementary school. Mine was a Star Wars one, all dented and scratched, but I thought it was the coolest thing ever. It made this specific metallic clank when you opened it, and everyone knew what you had by the character on the front. The best part was trading lunch items with friends. You'd lay everything out on the lunch table like it was a miniature marketplace. The worst part? When you dropped it in the hallway, and it made this huge clang that echoed everywhere, and everyone would turn to look at you. And don't even get me started on the thermos inside. They always seemed to leak just a little bit, leaving everything slightly soggy by lunchtime. After school meant Schoolhouse Rock blasting from the TV, teaching us grammar through catchy tunes that still pop into my head today. You'd flip through the massive World Book Encyclopedia set that every family seemed to have. getting lost in random articles about ancient Egypt or deep-sea creatures. The Viewmaster was our virtual reality. Click-through scenes of faraway places, the plastic wheel making that satisfying chunk sound with each new picture. Our living room was a jungle of boho chic, complete with a massive orange beanbag chair that had its own gravitational pull. Once you sat in it, escape required a three-point plan and possibly a rescue team. The static electricity from those tiny foam beads could power a small city, and the crackly symphony every time you moved became our house's soundtrack. But man, was it the perfect spot for Saturday morning cartoons?
Doctor, my belly aches!
You got butterflies in your stomach!
I can still feel my hands shaking while playing Operation at Tommy's house. We'd gather around that crazy red-nosed patient, everyone holding their breath as someone went for the wishbone. That buzzer was like an electric shock straight to your soul. But the real psychological torture came when the batteries started dying. That weak, wheezing buzz was somehow more nerve-wracking than the full-strength one. We became amateur surgeons, developing steady hands and iron nerves, all for the pride of successfully removing a plastic butterfly from a grown man's stomach. Coming home after school meant following your nose to the kitchen. Mom's specialty was something she called Hamburger Surprise, basically Hamburger Helper with whatever vegetables needed rescuing from the crisper drawer. The whole house would smell like onions and garlic, mixing with the sweet scent of chocolate chip cookies cooling on the counter. Those cookies never quite made it to dessert time. We'd swipe them one by one, leaving a trail of crumbs as evidence. Outside, you could hear the neighborhood symphony. Skateboards rumbling over sidewalk cracks, bike bells warning pedestrians, and kids arguing over whose turn it was to be it. Nothing beat the gentle symphony of dawn, the soft clink of glass milk bottles, the whisper of the milkman's footsteps on our porch. In winter, we'd race out to catch the bottles before the cream could freeze, though sometimes we were too late and found nature's popsicles pushing up those foil caps. That first morning glass of milk, extra cold and creamy on top, made even grape nuts taste like dessert. My easy-bake oven adventures usually ended with something that looked more like a science experiment than a cake. But man, the anticipation while waiting for that tiny pan to slide through. Jenny from next door and I would set up our own cooking show in my basement, narrating each step like Julia Child. That warm, sweet smell of chocolate cake would fill the room, even if the final product was barely bigger than a cookie. We'd split that tiny treat 4 ways, crumbs and all, proud as professional bakers. Once we tried making a wedding cake by stacking 3 layers. It looked like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. But in our minds, we were master pastry chefs. What's your favorite 1970s memory? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for taking a trip down memory lane to relive the magic of 1970s nostalgia. From the charm of popular TV shows of the 1970s, like Happy Days, to the unforgettable beats of 70s music and classic rock from the 70s, the era was truly one of a kind. We've revisited 70s fashion with iconic bell-bottoms and disco style, and celebrated the best movies of the 70s like Star Wars and Rocky. Whether it's the joy of 70s toys like the Rubik's Cube or 70s childhood memories, the 70s will always hold a special place in our hearts.